Hey everybody, welcome back to the Seagull Football Network. I am Braden, this is my brother Ben. Today we are continuing our deep dive into the NFC East, finishing up with the second and third ranked teams from last season. First though, we do have a little bit of news that we're going to go over. There are a couple extensions that we want to talk about. First up, the 49ers extended quarterback Brock Purdy on a 5-year, $265 million deal with $181 million guaranteed. It's a really big deal, locking up their quarterback of the future. This is a really big deal. They obviously got Kittle done earlier this offseason, and now they've locked up Brock Purdy, who was Mr. Irrelevant and is now making over $200 million total. That's absolutely bonkers. Super happy for him. The 49ers, continuing that trend of locking up their key players, also extended Fred Warner, their linebacker, for 3 years, $63 million, and with $56 million of that guaranteed. This is the second time in his 7-year career that he is the league's highest paid linebacker, which is really interesting, and he's earned it 100%. Last but not least, the Chicago Bears extended guard Joe Thuney on a 2-year deal worth $35 million with $33.5 million guaranteed. Ben, what are your thoughts on these 3 extensions?
Yeah, I'll start off with Purdy and Fred Warner from San Francisco. The first thing I got to say is the odds of a player making his second contract with the team that drafted him is incredibly low, like astronomically low if you look at the statistics for the last however many years. The fact that Fred Warner not only got a second contract but is now on his third contract with the team that drafted him, it's a testament to what kind of a player he is, and that is elite. That is Hall of Fame level. Fred Warner is one of the best linebackers in today's NFL, and I don't think he gets his flowers enough from a lot of NFL viewers. He's a great player. He was the original Robert Saleh linebacker, and so the fact that Robert Saleh's back and they go hand him the bag again, it says a lot to who he is. And he's going to be 30 this year, but he's got another extension, and he's going to be in San Francisco for a long time. With the Brock Purdy extension, he's also going to be in San Francisco for a long time. Obviously, he played in a Super Bowl a couple of years back, so there's a lot we can say about Brock Purdy. It's a lot of money, and so I'm a big fan of it, but I am a little bit concerned because Brock Purdy has played very well, but it's been pretty clear that a lot of his success comes from the surrounding weapons. I'm not saying he's not a good quarterback. In fact, I believe he is a very good quarterback. But we're in an age of the NFL where supporting weapons are what makes a very good quarterback 9 times out of 10. And if you're paying Brock Purdy that much money, are you going to be able to continue to have the cap space to give him the weapons he's been blessed with for the last 3-4 years of his career? And I don't know if that's going to be the case. We already saw them trade away a couple of players. Now they gave top of the market deals to Purdy, Kittle, Fred Warner. So are they going to have the money to bring in weapons again, or is this it? And I'd be really interested to see what their plan is to remain competitive after this year's retooling. Moving on to Chicago Bears guard Joe Thuney. Obviously, they got Joe Thuney from the Chiefs for peanuts. It was a 2026 4th-round pick. Obviously, Kansas City didn't want his contract on the books because it got way more expensive near the end here, and that is why the Bears extended him. A lot of people are like, wait, why would they extend him before he's seen the field? An extension, what it does is it takes how much we're paying him now and it spreads it out over that amount of time. So that 2-year extension helps the Bears foot that deal a little bit better and manage the money a little bit better. It's mostly guaranteed, so it really is just kind of like a bonus that helps them spread out money. It's not like they're worried about whether he makes it through the contract or not. They really are just saying, hey, we're going to spread your money out because he gets the money the same speed, but it hits the cap differently, which allows the Bears to manage it better. Joe Thuney has been, an elite guard for the Chiefs and the Patriots for years and years and years. He has 4 Super Bowl titles from 2 different teams. So, I'm a big fan of him, and I think he's a great addition for Chicago. So the extension to ensure that they can continue to pay his contract is a great move.
Yeah, I agree. My one hesitation with the Thuney extension is his age. He is 33 this season, which is, on the older end for a guard. But he's been a really solid player. He's been very healthy and hasn't showed signs of slowing yet. So overall, it's not a deal that I'm super opposed to. It's just, I could see it being a little bit tough if he does retire, get injured this season and then retire. But overall, I think it's a pretty solid extension.
I agree. I agree. It could totally be an injury or something like that. But as far as his injury history says, it's unlikely that he gets hurt, and so it's a gamble on the fact that he's been good up to this point. And again, like I said, they're not worried about if they'd like him to make it through the full contract, but if he doesn't, it means that they could pay those first couple of years easier, regardless. And that's what the extension ultimately was for.
Yeah, for sure. That being said, let's jump in and talk about the second ranked team in the NFC East from 2024. That is the Washington Commanders. Starting off with their greatest strength, I talked about him last year a ton. I made a whole separate video about him. I'm talking about Jaden Daniels once again. Daniels was a surprise to many people last season, getting to the NFC Championship game as a rookie, which is something that not many quarterbacks have done. His dynamic play style left most defenses stumped, didn't know how to handle him between his passing ability and his running ability. And with some new additions to the offense, I think Daniels can actually be even better in 2025. His preparedness and improvement in the league last season leads me to believe that with the added weapons and with an improved O-line, Daniels could be potentially the best quarterback in the league this season. I'm really excited about what he's going to do. I don't hate their schedule too much. They definitely have some tough games on there, but compared to especially like the Eagles' schedule, it looks a lot lighter. So I'm really, really excited about Jaden Daniels, and I think he's definitely their greatest strength. Ben, what did you pick out as the Commanders' biggest strength in 2025?
Yeah, I am one of those people, full disclosure, who was not a believer in the Commanders and specifically Jaden Daniels. I remember specifically saying last year, I was like, Jaden Daniels is going to be a great quarterback in the NFL. He's going to be very good. But I didn't believe that it was going to happen so quickly. So kudos to you for calling that one. My greatest strength is relating to Jaden Daniels, but it is not Jaden Daniels, and that is the pass catching core. Their receivers and tight ends. I believe that Jaden Daniels' success was in part due to the pass catching core, and as teams start to adjust to him and start to understand how he plays and try to counter him a little bit better, he's going to rely more on that talent. And there's a reason that they brought in Deebo Samuel, right? And they tried to make that receiving core better. Obviously, offensive coordinator Cliff Kingsbury runs a spread air raid offense. There's 3 to 4 plus wide receivers on the field pretty much the entire game. Sometimes there's more than that. He also likes his pass catching tight ends. Sometimes he lines them up in line, sometimes they're out wide, regardless. But I believe that with this play style, he has the perfect setup for his scheme, right? Terry McLaurin had one of his best seasons in his career under Kingsbury that first year. The trade for Deebo Samuel, once again, was peanuts for a player who's yes, past his prime, but still a great athlete. I believe that they kind of stole from the 49ers there. And obviously, for the 49ers, it was a contract issue. But for those of you who don't know, it really was a 2025 fifth for Deebo Samuel. That's all it was. It was just a fifth. And that fifth turned into a late round running back. So yeah, San Fran was able to cut the contract off their cap, and they didn't have to worry about it. But again, Washington got a heck of a weapon. And I think that he's going to be great for Washington here. Noah Brown has starting experience on 2 different teams. He's no elite receiver, but he's been clutch every time that it matters. Obviously, rookie from last year, Luke McCaffrey, showed flashes of being a very good slot and gadget style player. And he's going to flourish even more given a year or two under Deebo Samuel, right? That's the type of player that I think McCaffrey can be. KJ Osborne, they signed him in free agency. He's a great rotational downfield player. He's just kind of your take a shot player on third down. He's not going to play every down, but when he's out there, he has the potential to be electric. And I believe that rookie Jalen Lane out of Virginia Tech has the ability to play that exact same role down the line this season or in future seasons. On top of all that, tight end Zach Ertz is still producing in the red zone and on short yardage plays, and sometimes just even on regular downs. He's nearly 35 years old, but it hasn't slowed him down. And all of this group of receivers is a major reason, as I said, why Jaden Daniels succeeded last year. They'll have to make some more sizable adjustments this year than they did last year to keep the league from countering their offense. The sophomore slump is heavily documented. A team is very good in that first year, whether it's of a new coordinator, a new head coach, a new quarterback, whatever it is. And then they hit that second year and teams start to adjust. Teams start to say, hey, we know what you do now. And I think that Washington's going to experience that some. So without this receiving core, it would be a lot tougher on Daniels. So that's why I called it my strength.
Yeah, that's absolutely fair. I'm really excited to see what they're able to do, both the receivers and Daniels. I think behind Ben Johnson, the coach who's most likely to keep things fresh, though, is probably Dan Quinn. So I'm really excited to see what he's able to do, along with Kingsbury as well. Um, Jumping down to the greatest weakness, I went with the defensive line. I was expecting a big move from the Commanders with the defensive line, whether by the draft or free agency or by trade, but they have done pretty much nothing on this front. They've been very, very quiet. They didn't draft anybody on the defensive line. They didn't trade for anybody on the defensive line. And their biggest signing was Javon Kinlaw, former 49ers defensive tackle. He will certainly help, especially against the run, but they really still need a playmaker on the defensive line, especially to help that pass rush. Um, and, I've been talking about for a little bit. I don't remember if I said it on the podcast or not. I want them to go get Trey Hendrickson. I think, his contract talks have ended with the Bengals. He's frustrated. He's not going to get an extension. He's talking about holding out of games. I think it's a perfect fit for the Commanders to be able to go and get a really solid player for the defensive line to boost their chances a bit this season. What did you pick out as their biggest weakness?
Yeah, I was pretty much along the same line as you. I didn't say their full defensive line. I did say pass rush, but I think that the defensive line itself is also a suffering unit for sure. The Commanders went from, for those of you who might not remember, the Commanders went from having one of the most formidable fronts in the NFL just a few years ago with Montez Sweat, Chase Young, Jonathan Allen, Daron Payne, to having one of those players still on the roster. One. Um, and now, what their line looks like is much less formidable. Dorrance Armstrong played his first season in Washington last year, and he was good. I mean, he was good, but he was no Montez Sweat. He wasn't Jonathan Allen. And so he's going to need a defensive end on the other side, like you mentioned, like Trey Hendrickson or something. To help him, they tried to bring in another defensive end. They signed former New England Patriot defensive end Dietrich Wise. I like Wise. Wise is a solid player, but he's going to be 31 before the season even starts, I think this July, and he's definitely much better against the run. He's no pass rushing beast. And so you're pairing two guys who average 4, 5, 6 sacks a year on each side, and it's nothing like what you want from a strong front. Jazon Newton was an incredible draft pick from last year, the defensive tackle. He made a lot of big plays, but he's mostly an inside stuffer. He's not the greatest pass rusher ever. And he's definitely a rotational player, at least at this point in his career. Obviously, Daron Payne, their 3-tech, I think he's their best pass rusher on the roster. And that's not saying much when he's a 3-tech. The one wild card for me, I believe, could be former first-round New Orleans Saint Peyton Turner. He never really panned out as a toolsy Dennis Allen selection in 2021. But he's got a lot of standout traits. He was rotational for most of New Orleans, and also New Orleans was just bad, frankly. And so if he gets a chance to get some snaps here in Dan Quinn's defense, I think he could be a wild card. He could definitely turn into a very good pass rusher. I'm not banking on it, but he is a wild card because, like I said, he's a former first rounder. He's got a lot of tools in his chest. Maybe he's not the most technically sound edge rusher, but that's something that can be learned. So if he gets the opportunity here, he could be something. Head coach Dan Quinn's defense, it's not known for being very pass rush heavy, right? But you've still got to have something. And if I'm grasping at straws and saying, oh, well, maybe Peyton Turner, that's not a good sign. There's little to nothing on this roster in the way of competent pass rush, and that's why I specifically said pass rush. But yeah, outside of Daron Payne, it's tough to say that they've got a good run defense either. So I can agree with you on defensive line. And I will speak to the Trey Hendrickson thing for a minute here. I'd love to see it as well. For those of you who aren't super familiar with the discourse here, Trey Hendrickson has been upset. He wants a new contract. Cincinnati has been in talks with him, but they're not meeting him where he wants to be. He's had a couple of text conversations with head coach Zach Taylor. Obviously, we will never know what those interactions sounded like or what they were, but he seems incredibly peeved about it. I've never seen a player behave like this over texts. It's definitely something to keep an eye on. I would put my money on him getting traded before week 1, but not very long before. Maybe a couple of weeks, mid preseason, because they want to see if they can keep him around. Frankly, the business move is they want to just make him play on the contract. They're trying to play the long game with him and see who blinks first. But I'll be honest, I think the Bengals are going to blink. I don't think Hendrickson's going to blink. Um, so yeah, I could totally see him getting shipped off. Washington would be a great fit.
Yeah, I totally agree. And honestly, like with their lack of moves on the D line leading up to the draft, like I kind of expected a draft night trade for Hendrickson. I had even done a mock draft where that happened, where they traded for Hendrickson, traded away their first round pick, allowing the Bengals to get more defensive players. But obviously that didn't happen. So we'll have to see what happens with Hendrickson as we move forward. Um, Moving on, though, to the best veteran addition for the Commanders. I went with former Houston Texans tackle Laramie Tunsil. While Daniels made something out of nothing plenty of times last season, I'd like to see him work with better protection. His O-line was not incredible. They were pretty solid overall, but not the best in the world. And I think Tunsil brings some of that added protection that he really needs. He's been a top tackle for years. He was a first overall, or not a first overall pick, but a first round pick. And barring injury, I think he will bring great blindside protection for Daniels the entire season long. He hasn't really struggled with too much injury that I recall. I think he's had a couple, but nothing super major. And while he is getting a little older, he's been solid despite that. I think he was by far Houston's best offensive lineman last season. So I'm really excited about this addition for the Commanders. Who did you pick out as their best veteran add?
Yeah, I agree 100% with your selection of Laramie Tunsil. He was also my selection. I debated talking about Debo Samuel, but I like Debo, like I said, but I think that Laramie Tunsil is just such a huge impact for this offense, and for Jaden Daniels to continue to develop, that I thought that Debo had to fall underneath him. That being said, again, Debo is going to be a great weapon. I think Jaden Daniels is going to greatly improve because of the weapons that they put around him, especially Debo. But yeah, Laramie Tunsil's my pick. And given that, here's some context. Last year, the Commanders had third round rookie Brandon Coleman at left tackle and Andrew Wiley, a longtime Chief brought over by Eric Bieniemy a couple of years ago, at right tackle. Coleman was good for a day 2 rookie, but he clearly had a lot to improve on the blind side. And Wiley's been really nothing special since signing in Washington. It's yet another example of a Chiefs player or coach that leaves that environment and suddenly is not nearly as good as they appeared to be. Um, anyway, so Washington, they I think they approached this with a, okay, yeah, we have Brandon Coleman and we see a future with him, but we need somebody more prepared at left tackle this coming season. So they traded for longtime left tackle to Laramie Tunsil from the Houston Texans. Like you talked about, he was a first round pick. He was supposed to be a top 5 pick. He dropped because of some character concerns, but he has played like a top 5 pick most of his career. Um, Washington sent a pretty large haul of picks and give it 2 years for us to see kind of who all those picks turn into and all of that. And yeah, Houston might benefit a little bit more from this trade, given that Tunsil's 30 something. But Washington is contending. They know they're contending, so they're making moves that align with contending. And when you are contending, you're willing to give up more for those final pieces of the puzzle. Tunsil's a very good tackle, not elite level. He's been a starter since he was drafted in 2016. And like I was talking about with Brandon Coleman, this was pre-draft, so they didn't know who they were going to get in the draft. They didn't know who would still be available. So they said, okay, let's bring in Tunsil to protect the blind side. Now we can move over Brandon Coleman from left to right in his second year, and they were excited about that because he's a good player. Then they drafted Oregon tackle Josh Conerly Jr. in the first round. And Josh Conerly, the special thing about him is he played left tackle in college, but their intention now is to move him over to right tackle and compete him and Brandon Coleman. I think that this pick was both for now and for the future, given that Laramie Tunsil's 30 something. soon enough, he's either going to retire, they're going to trade him again, whatever the case. Meaning they can move Josh Connerly back over to his more natural spot of left tackle. And given that couple of years, Brandon Coleman will have had time to learn, develop, and he can be a very good right tackle for Washington. So I'm a big fan of the Laramie Tunsil trade because it just gives them that space to continue to contend, but in 2 or 3 years to also still have very solid starters in place.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of Josh Connerly Jr., he's actually who I picked out as my favorite rookie edition of theirs. Um, Follows kind of the same logic as Tunsil. They need tackles, they need protection for Daniels, like you talked about. And, whether he wins the right tackle spot or not, if anything does happen to Tunsil, he'll be able to slot in if anything happens to Coleman, or Coleman kind of falls off a little bit once the season starts. The idea is they'll be able to have somebody who can fall into either of those two spots and help fill in. So I think that's their best rookie addition. And I like what I've seen from Connerly so far, the film that I watched pre-draft. So I'm excited about that addition as well.
Yeah, I also selected Josh Connerly as my best impact rookie. I really wanted to slide down the board, but I just wasn't a huge fan of Washington's draft the more that I looked at it. It seemed like they were taking non-needs. It seemed like they were taking players that weren't needs when they had needs sitting on the board in front of them. I like Josh Connerly as a player. Trey Amos is one of my favorite corners from the draft, but it's just they had bigger needs than that in the first couple of days of the draft. And then later in the draft, unfortunately, I just don't think they had the volume of picks to really justify what they were doing. But anyway, if I was in the first round, I probably would have taken a defensive playmaker. But all of that aside, Connerly is a very good player. I'm a little bit worried about asking him to swap sides the moment he walks in the door, but I think that they will do a good job here. Washington has a strong offensive coaching staff, so I think that they'll be able to roll him right into right tackle. He's got a lot of great physical talent. I think Connerly needs to work heavily on his run blocking skills, but that is fine because Washington is going to be pretty pass happy. They were last year. They're going to continue to be so this year. So I really don't think it's going to be that much of an issue. And frankly, going from Andrew Wiley and Brandon Coleman to Laramie Tunsil and Josh Connerly and Brandon Coleman as a swing tackle, I can guarantee you Jaden Daniels is going to take a whole lot less sacks.
Yeah, and he might not be the best at run blocking, but you don't necessarily need to be for that run game. I think all three primary runners in Daniels, Robinson, and Eckler all averaged over 5 yards per carry, if I'm remembering correctly.
That sounds
They might
correct.
have been a little bit lower than that for a couple of them, but um, so they're already obviously solid running players, and they don't necessarily need the top end of run blocking to keep that going. All right, so for the Commanders' projected record, I have them projected at 11-6, with a ceiling of 15-2 and a floor of 9-8. I think that's pretty much right about where I had the Eagles as well. I think the Eagles roster is better, for sure, but I think they have a tougher schedule than the Commanders do. The Commanders have some of the same games, but they're missing some like the Bills, the Rams, and the Buccaneers, who I think are going to be tougher opponents for the Eagles. And the Commanders kind of slipped out of that one, so I'm putting them right about the same place as the Eagles.
Well, yeah, and I haven't talked about it a whole lot yet, but we were talking about it a little bit before the episode. I'm just worried about Washington, their ability to play at the level that they did last year. Well, not even that. I think that they will play at the level that they did last year. I worry about teams starting to adjust to them and play at their level. They were a 12-win team, and they were a 12-win team for a reason. They earned that. But as I talked about earlier, sophomore slump, okay, it happens. Teams come in, they expect to be performing a certain way, or teams start knowing what they can show, and they're like, okay, we're going to counter you a little bit better, and then they struggle to counter. Uh, of all coaches, Cliff Kingsbury is one of the most notorious for not being very good at adjusting. So I just have some concerns about that. I also would like to point out Washington was playing a fourth place schedule last year, and now they're playing a second place schedule, and that is gonna heavily affect who they're playing and, frankly, how difficult their schedule is. So yeah, maybe it's not as hard as Philadelphia, but I'm looking at super strong defenses here, right? That's kind of what I'm worried about is defenses that can counter the Jaden Daniels effect. And I'm right off the bat, I'm seeing I'm seeing Los Angeles, the Chargers. I'm seeing Kansas City. I'm seeing Seattle, Detroit, Denver, Minnesota. They do play Philadelphia twice, and that's week 16 and 18, both in the final 3 weeks of the season. So it's just one of those things where it's like, yes, they're going to be a good team and they're going to play like a good team, but our team's going to start knowing what they're facing, and are they going to be able to adjust better? And that being said, my projections are a little bit less optimistic. I projected a 9-8 season from Washington with a floor of 7-10 and a ceiling of 11-6. Like I said, it's a little bit on the Debbie Downer side of things, but I'm struggling to see a team succeed when they have a much harder schedule, and so I think they're gonna look good, but they're gonna run into some bad times even still. Think Houston last year. And a lot of you might say, oh, well, Houston won 10 games. They're in the AFC South. They're in the AFC South. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. That's so many guaranteed wins already. So that's why they were still 10-7. If they were in any other division, they would have been an 8-9 team. And that's what I see from Washington is a team that's going to play well. We're going to see flashes. Jaden Daniels is still going to be the same Jaden Daniels, but they might not win as many games.
Yeah, for sure. All right, that wraps up the Commanders. Now we'll move to the third ranked team from the NFC East last season. That is the Dallas Cowboys. Starting off with their greatest strength, I ended up picking their wide receivers. Now, if you had asked me this a couple weeks ago, I don't think this would have been my answer. But since then, they did trade for Steelers wide receiver George Pickens. I'm not the biggest fan of George Pickens overall. He shows up really big in strange moments. It's not the big moments that he shows up big in necessarily, but he'll have some crazy highlight for no reason on a random second down. And he has some attitude problems that could be a concern moving forward. That being said, pairing him with CeeDee Lamb and Jake Ferguson ends up with a really strong receiving core. They do have good depth underneath that as well with like Kevontae Turpin and Jalen Tolbert, who I think are pretty decent overall. I think one of the biggest questions, though, for this wide receiver group is going to be whether Dak can stay healthy and live up to the contract that he has. Obviously, he missed a bunch of time last season. So is he going to come back the same? Is he going to look a little bit off? And is he going to connect well with this new receiver in George Pickens? I don't know. But either way, I think this is a really, really strong receiving core. So that's what I picked out as their biggest strength. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I agree. I've been a Dak Prescott fan for probably too many years. I know that he gets a lot of crap from people, and rightfully so. He should have been able to get them over the hump a couple of times. But I will also argue against that because I don't think that Dallas has done an adequate job of surrounding him with weapons, frankly, ever. I don't think that they do a very good job of that. And I think that this is the first time that I've seen a real effort from Dallas in doing so. CeeDee is an elite receiver. George Pickens, I don't think that he's a number one, but that's exactly why I think he fits in Dallas, is he can really complement CeeDee Lamb. And you're going to struggle to decide where to allot your defending players when you've got those two on the field at the same time. I do like their running backs in terms of pass catching. Obviously, you talked about Jake Ferguson, and I think that their depth is pretty solid. Jonathan Mingo, and there were a couple other players that I was looking at earlier, and now I'm blanking. But I do think that they've got some good depth over there as well. And so I think that now Dak doesn't have any excuses, so it's do or die for him. Is he going to be able to actually play up to the level that I think he can, or is he going to fail? So I really like that. My greatest strength was a little bit different, and that is the defensive side of the ball. The defensive side of the Cowboys roster has been very good for many, many years now. Under Dan Quinn, they were an elite level defense. Under Mike Zimmer, they struggled a little bit, but Mike Zimmer really has shown that he can't keep up with the times in terms of countering offenses, and they were incredibly injured last year. So in terms of their coaching staff, I'm not the greatest fan of the Brian Schottenheimer promotion. I think that it was kind of boneheaded, frankly. But his selection of Matt Eberflus as defensive coordinator, Bears fans, you know I'm a Bears fan, cover your ears. It was a very wise move. I'm actually a big fan of Eberflus being hired by Dallas. Obviously, his time in Chicago as head coach did not end pleasantly, but I don't think it's ever been in question whether he's a good defensive play caller. I think he is one of the best defensive play callers in the NFL. While in Indianapolis, his defenses were constantly top 10. And in Chicago, they didn't always rank high because they were on the field for way too long. But he showed a great eye for talent and is very skilled at developing that talent to its fullest potential. There are a couple of players on this roster who might not be healthy for week one, such as linebacker DeMar Van Overshown, cornerback Trevon Diggs, but they've got very solid depth. They drafted a few key pieces as well. And so I really think it's a solid team. In the secondary, you've got Deron Bland and Diggs. They drafted Siobhan Ravel in the third round. I think that's a steal. If he hadn't been injured, he would have gone probably in the first. Uh, Donovan Wilson and Malik Hooker have been a very good safety duo for the last couple of years. Obviously, in the trenches, Micah Parsons is in Dallas at least for one more year. They brought back Dante Fowler. I don't think Fowler is going to be the level that he was in Washington, but he is a good edge rusher. Interior defensive line of Mazzie Smith and Odighizuwa, I really think it's solid. Something that I think flew under the radar was they traded for Tennessee linebacker Kenneth Murray. He was a solid linebacker, especially in coverage for Tennessee, but unfortunately, the former general manager, Rand Carthen, in my opinion, and I said this last year and the year before, he got a little bit ahead of himself, committing cap space to players as if the roster was already competitive. He signed guys and traded for guys as if he thought they were going to be win now mode, and they were far from win now mode. And I think a lot of people were confused by that. And I think that's why he got fired. And so new general manager Mike Borgonzi decided it was best to get whatever he could for Kenneth Murray because they're just not ready to pay for players like him yet. Overall, Dallas has put together a really solid group of players. And I do believe that with Eberflus calling the plays, this side of the ball will be top half of the league. It's up to the offense really whether they're going to be contending.
Yeah, for sure. We were talking about Eberflus as the defensive coordinator before the episode, and I totally agree. I think he's a really good defensive coordinator. I think he's probably, if we're going, just generally defensive play callers, I think he's probably top 10 to 12. So I think it's a really, really solid hiring there, and I'm excited to see what he's able to do with that defense.
Yeah.
Now, you did mention a little bit, you talked when in response to the wide receivers, you said you like the running backs as pass catchers. That's great. What I did end up picking out as my biggest weakness, though, are those running backs. Javonte Williams and Miles Sanders, who are the Cowboys' top two backs currently, combined for 1,924 yards over the last two seasons, averaging out to less than 500 yards a season for each of them. Beyond this duo, they have a couple unproven players that really haven't shown much so far, and this puts a lot of pressure on the rest of the offense, on Dak and on those receivers, which I think could potentially cause some trouble during the season if the pass game starts suffering for any reason, whether it's a good pass defense or Dak's just not on his game. I think their entire offense could stall out because they don't have a second option to fall back onto. What did you pick out as the Cowboys' biggest weakness?
I also selected the run game. It's atrocious there in Dallas. New head coach Brian Schottenheimer is notorious for beginning the season with a newfound commitment to the run game. He ensures everybody he's going to run to open the pass. He's going to make it work, but it doesn't last. As an offensive coordinator, he ranks very low in the amount of runs per game, and his rushing offenses only ranked top half of the league 3 or 4 times in 14 total years as an offensive coordinator. They were mostly in the 25s, like late 20s. He does not know how to put together a run game. I don't know why, because all of the Schottenheimer family typically has very solid run games, but Brian has just struggled with that. And obviously Dallas is doing him no favors on the side of personnel, signing middling running back Javonte Williams from Denver and Carolina's Miles Sanders, who had a great 2022 season in Philadelphia, but I would argue that was buoyed by the elite offensive line, and it was not his doing because we saw what he was in Carolina. They drafted 2 running backs this year, which I think people expected, but they were both on day 3, which people did not expect. And I would argue that neither really is a clear-cut starter off the bat. I do believe Texas running back Jaden Blue has the potential to eventually be a starter for Dallas, but not in his first season, and certainly not under these circumstances with Schottenheimer as the play caller. Um, Schottenheimer's first year, uh, this is a little premature, but possibly only year as a head coach is likely going to be incredibly impressive in the passing game. Expect Dak to put up some pretty gaudy numbers, all things considered, because he's proven he can sling it when he's got weapons and protection, and they did a very good job of bringing in weapons and protection for him. I think we'll talk about that in literally just a second. But they've got no support from the run game, and I think that could be the offense's downfall. And as I said, the defense is going to be good. If the offense falls, the entire team falls. And that's a shameful way to go.
Yeah, for sure. Like you mentioned, we are about to talk about some added weapons and protection. Starting off with the best veteran edition, I did go with George Pickens. The Cowboys have kind of been made fun of lately for not making any really big moves in the offseason, despite having, the money for it, despite having big needs and available players out there. But it feels like they finally did it. They finally kind of made a move that really fit with the team. It filled in a need, and it's a big name player in George Pickens. Um, the front office, like I said, seemed to be a little bit dead for a couple seasons there, but I think this move really showed that they are actually alive. They can make things happen during the offseason. They do still have jobs when games are not being played. And I think George Pickens is going to be a really solid addition to that receiving core, like we talked about earlier.
Using the word dead to describe the front office that's run by Jerry Jones feels a little pointed. Um, yeah, I agree with you. Pittsburgh wide receiver George Pickens was my impact veteran edition as well. Yes, George Pickens had attitude problems in Pittsburgh. There is no guarantee that he won't have attitude problems in Dallas. But a change of scenery could never hurt. A change of scenery has proven to help other players in the past. And obviously, Dak Prescott is significantly better than any quarterback Pickens has played with up to this point. And so, I mean, if it comes down to is he getting targets? Does he feel like the quarterback is delivering it to him correctly? Then Dak Prescott's the best answer you could ask for, and George Pickens will be perfectly happy. We'll have to see. But yeah, absolutely. I think that this could definitely help his attitude. Like I said a second ago, Pickens is not a number one. He is an elite complementary weapon with great run blocking skills and incredible route running. With CeeDee Lamb on the other side, it's certainly going to be tough for opposing defenses to account for both of them. I believe we might see one of the best passing seasons Dak Prescott has ever had. And that's coming from somebody who has had some pretty impressive passing seasons in the past. This isn't, a hard and fast prediction. I save those for closer to the season, but I mean, imagine seeing a 5,000-yard season from Dak if everyone stays healthy. He's got the protection, he's got weapons now, and they've got no run game. It's the perfect recipe, in my opinion.
That's fair, yeah. Speaking of that protection, though, I picked out guard Tyler Booker as my favorite rookie addition of the Cowboys, especially with the retirement of Zach Martin. The Cowboys needed somebody to come in and bolster the O line, especially at the guard position, and they did. They brought in Tyler Booker, yet another Tyler for the offensive line. He's one of three Tylers on their offensive line, and he looks to make an instant impact protecting Prescott and hopefully making running lanes for whoever ends up carrying the ball. Um, I think he's a really solid player overall. I like the addition. I thought it was a decent pick. I might have gone running back personally, or traded back and gotten a running back a little bit later. But I do like the selection of Tyler Booker. I think it's a really solid pick overall. Who did you end up picking out as your favorite rookie that they drafted?
I selected second round, 44th overall, defensive end Donovan Iziruku out of Boston College. Iziruku was one of my favorite edge prospects in this year's draft. I think I talked about it a couple of times throughout the draft process, and I genuinely expected him to go in the first round. I was pretty surprised that he didn't. He's the prototypical Eberflus defensive end. He's long, stupid fast, has elite level bend. His run defense talent is essentially non-existent at this point in his career, which is not great. So he's likely to be a package player early on in his career, but Flus really isn't bothered by this. This type of player is Flus's dream on the edge. It allows him to allot resources other places and blanket the field effectively because he's got an edge rusher who plays like a freaking ghost. He just goes through people. Especially pairing him across from Micah Parsons. Like I said, he's going to be a package player. They're going to shift him around third and long, third downs, long yardage. But when he's across from Micah Parsons and or just on the line with Micah Parsons, it's going to be formidable. It's going to be really tough to stop. And I don't think you can ever have too many edge rushers. And so a lot of people are like, oh, well, they've got Marshawn Nealon, they've got Sam Williams. I don't think that you can ever have too many edge rushers. It allows you for a really deep rotation. And that's exactly the position that Izzy Iruaku is going to play this year. He's not going to be an every down starter, 100% snap count player. He's rotating and he's going to be a package player. Do expect some flash plays on those package plays, long yardage and third down, like I said, and expect him to play into a more permanent role in upcoming years. But yeah, for now, I think that he's going to be a huge impact. I could totally see, an 8-9 sack season or double digits, even if he's playing 40 to 50% of the snaps because of just what type of pass rusher he is. And also, people are going to be double teaming Micah Parsons.
Yeah, for sure. Having Parsons on the other side definitely makes your job a whole lot simpler. All right, lastly, here for the Cowboys, let's talk about their projected record. Now, what I'm about to say might seem kind of low, right? We've been kind of high on the pass catchers and the offense minus running backs, and we've been high on the defense. So this might seem low, and a lot of this comes from not having confidence in the coaching staff currently. I think the Cowboys could definitely be a surprise. I think they could definitely outperform what I've projected, but I'm going to have to see a little bit of it before I really believe it. So the projected record I have for the Cowboys is 6-11. I have a ceiling of 9-8 and a floor of 3-14.
Yeah, I actually agree with you. Like you said, we've been pretty high on this team so far. But liking individual components of a team doesn't necessarily mean that you think that they're all going to work together. And I agree. The biggest takeaway from this team is I do not like this coaching staff. I don't think that Brian Schottenheimer is ready to be a head coach. I don't think that he is a leader. His offensive history tells us that he's inconsistent. He is unreliable. He doesn't know how to create a run game. And so I do have worries about this team from a leadership perspective, both on the offense and in general. I think that the defense is going to be good in terms of play calling, but frankly, we also know that Matt Eberflus is not the best leader. And if we don't have any strong personalities in this locker room that can really get these guys motivated, it's going to be tough to build a good team. So I agree with you, actually. The defense might perform well. The passing game might surprise us, but I don't think the team is going to gel the way we expect. My projection is a little bit higher at 7-10 with a floor of 5-12, but the ceiling of 9-8. Again, I just don't see them winning a lot of games, especially given the strength of schedule that the NFC East is facing this year. All right, everybody. Once again, thank you so much for watching. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button, turn on the little bell. Leave us a comment. What do you think about the NFC East division? We've completed all 4 teams now. Who do you think is the best? Who do you think is the worst? What are your record projections? Next week, we're going to be starting the AFC East. That is the Bills, Jets, Patriots, and Dolphins. I'm really excited about this division. I think it's going to surprise a couple of people, some of my thoughts on it. So we look forward to doing that, and let us know if you have any questions, and have a good week.